Hello, everyone. My name is Joel McLeod, and I am here in the new year back for 2023. Not flying completely solo. Roland is still away on vacation, but we're trying something a little different uh, this year or this time. We have an old friend of the podcast, old guest, Laura Steiner of the Milton Reporter is joining me on mic number two to be my co-pilot, co-host, partner in crime, however you want to have that title. Laura, welcome back.
Thank you. I had a good time last year when I was with you guys talking politics. So thanks for having me back. It's been fun, and I sort of like the idea of a partner in crime. So
Well,
we'll go with that one for a bit.
We'll see how the episode ends, then we'll make the final determination.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Wonderful. Yeah, so knowing our luck, we go away for the new year and expect to take it nice and easy, and then we come back and everything's just a whirlwind of stories. One of the things that Roland and I were talking about before the break that we said was going to be one of the bigger stories in 2023 was the ongoing issue of the greenbelt, and how like Bill 23 is not going to quiet down for the conservatives. We thought that was just going to, especially the issues surrounding how did the land get divvied up is a big question. And lo and behold, come back, and a few days ago the OPP announced that they were going to be launching or start the first steps of investigating what happened there. Who knew what, who said what were the details behind the greenbelt exchange, I guess it might be the best way to put it. Yeah, like what do you think, or what have you heard or about this, Laura? What do you have to say on
it? I actually, one of the things we were talking about was, I think it's the Globe and Mail did a bit of a walk back of a story that there was something. I hadn't read the original story, so that's disclaimer right there. But it was concerning a loan, something about a 21% interest rate on $100 million. Basically, it sounds like a case of what happened. It sounds like a case of publication sends inquiry to company does not respond right away. So the Globe and Mail sent this back in November, and December, January roll around, haven't heard anything. Story is published, and now finally the company has sent comments back, and they've kind of walked it back to something. I think the number, I want to say 32 million is actually the actual loan and the interest rate on that. So that's kind of where that's at. So that's a bit of a walk back, but there's still the whole concerning thing of the video that I think was brought to light maybe 3 years ago now, about press progress of the meeting with developers and all that stuff that I think should at least be investigated. But
well, I think the question that I think everybody has is just the convenient timing of like how do the developers know to buy the land in question, and then have it ready for it, for it to be freed up for development. That to me is always that's the crux of, like, who knew what, when do they know it, and who do they share? Because the law is pretty blatant. You cannot coerce a politician into making policy changes. I guess it's not, but basically, like, no government official can tell a developer or anyone beforehand of policy changes until the policy is officially made. Now, I always thought, like, well, what about the other way around? of the developers say, well, could you free up this part of land and we'll buy it, and then on the assumption that you're going to free it. Like, it's a technical detail, but is it enough to get them out of jail? I don't think so.
That's true. And there you were talking about that, and cash for access.
Yeah.
Fundraisers are that's kind of jumping around in my head as well. So developers, there's not many people in Ontario that have more money than developers, let's face it.
Mhm.
And if they're getting FaceTime with the premier and ministers, then that it's sort of course you would never be able to say, I don't think anyone is, I'm probably wrong, but I don't think anybody is stupid enough to get in a room and actually say, hey, do you mind, we'll give you this much of a donation if you just
I
you could do this to the greenbelt.
Laura, in a normal world, I'd say, yeah, that'd be a very silly and stupid thing to say. I don't know these days. I really don't. Like,
Yeah, I don't really.
it's one of those things, like, just the blatant transparency of just like the fact that this land was worthless, 6 months ago, completely worthless. It was undevelopable because it was in the green belt. So somebody buys it for a song, essentially buys it dirt cheap, and now it's potentially developable.
Mhm.
You said, like, no, we're not. It's one of those things, like, we're not stupid. Like, the people of Ontario are not stupid. Like, we can look and say, are you kidding me? Like, somebody knew something at a
Yeah.
really convenient time. And I mean, I'm astounded by the blatant, um, the blatant, oh, just the blatantness of it. Like, just like, you're not even hiding it. It's not even like, oh, let's put it through some back channels and whatnot. It's just like, no.
The out in the openness,
Well, that's
the
the thing.
transparency of it all,
Oh my,
even
well,
corruption.
that's even their, they're so committed to their transparency. Even the corruption is transparent. That's I don't want to say anything that's incriminating, because nothing's been proven in a court of law.
I
But I mean,
I should have said alleged.
yeah, it's alleged. But my God, like, the more you look at it, you say somebody knew something sometime and took advantage of it. Like, this is insider trading, in my opinion, plain and simple. I really don't see any way to spin it that. And that's the thing, like, this like, you get the sense that this government's all about, like, oh, we need to help out our buddies as much as possible, um because I don't know, they need to make a buck.
Yeah, but at the same time, I've done a lot of just with the green belt. I've done a lot of reporting out in Campbellville area, and in talking to some business owners, it's very hard to make a change to your property. They
Right.
have to go through and they have to go through the town for permits. They have to go Niagara Escarpment Commission. They have to, as well as the Greenbelt measures. So it's not as easy to sort of update your business or update your house kind of a thing. And so from that perspective, if there is any room for any of the tiniest amount of changes, it's probably in that on that angle more than the, hey, let's sell off wholesale sell off of land here, you know?
Well, but I mean, that's the point of that was the point of the green belt, was that you make it so onerous and so tricky, not tricky, but like, just really onerous or really difficult to, it's, you'd have to be able to make changes to your landscape there really only when it's absolutely necessary, not just because, well, I need I can make a buck here if I develop this plot of land.
True.
I That's
You
what,
want to
like,
make people think twice about it
what is you want you
on a
want them to,
larger scale.
well, that's the thing. Like that was the point, because the question people often had is like, why don't you turn the greenbelt into like a provincial park, right? If there's like a provincial park, you can't develop on it, right? At best, you could maybe put some tent sites on it or some camping grounds, and that'd be it. Um, but you can't, because the greenbelt is made up of privately owned, like rural farmland, or municipalities such as, Milton or Guelph and down the Niagara Escarpment. Um, so like, what can you do? So the idea is that, you just put so many roadblocks to development. Like,
Mm.
you put so much red tape in there that you can't develop it, and that was the point of it, was that so that you can't develop it, and that way it preserves it as a biosphere. Parents locks in place for, you know from that point forward,
Hmm.
right? And so, yeah, I find it all of it's highly just highly suspect that how the OPP. Yeah, I mean, I do find it interesting that the other aspect that I was going to say, but it was, when we had, before the break, we had on Tim Gray from Environmental Defense to speak about them pushing the OPP to investigate. The fact that the OPP is already doing that tells me that there's a huge movement of green grassroots movement happening.
Yeah.
That they're organizing themselves, and it's amazing that they're getting stuff done. And that's the thing that gets me, is that, it's on the ground movements that are getting this done. Not so much the opposition parties. I mean, the opposition parties put their complaints in, but it's like
Hmm.
grassroots people who are really pushing this forward.
Yeah, that's true. But then you have to wonder as well if the OPP is so quick, is kind of, I wouldn't say quick, I would say is so willing to get involved,
Mhm.
if they weren't already thinking of it, just because it's a delicate situation. Inevitably, you're being asked to investigate potential alleged corruption. I hope I'm getting that right.
No,
And
I think that's how I would
potential
describe it. Yeah.
alleged corruption
Mhm.
of the Premier of Ontario. And you have to tread extremely carefully here.
Well,
Otherwise,
yeah.
you don't want to, you got one chance basically. And then,
Well, here's the question then, like, the track record of this stuff coming through, you know, people always talk about, oh, we're, the RCMP and the OPP, they need to investigate, abuses of power at the highest echelons of power in Ontario or in Canada. And I question, like, what's the track record on convictions on this? It's not like it, as much as they are investigating. The other question I have is, like, what are the odds that they're actually going to find something that is demonstrably, like, the criminal actions have taken place here?
I they're very high, I would say. It's
Really?
I wouldn't say they're going to for sure, but um like I said, I think the fact they're getting involved, I don't I'm not sure if I don't think there's any public pressure involved in getting them to get involved and getting them involved, excuse me.
Right.
But um I I do think that it was like maybe they've had half an eye on things as they've developed,
Hmm.
just in case. But I also, like, for me anyway, yeah, it smells. You've got sort of the video which was brought forward. You've got sort of the land sales and speculation. I think you got to work on connecting the two for there to really
Right.
be a sense of it for me. Because
I
right now there's the video press progress has been covering this a lot,
Mhm.
but they'll have a story about against Doug Ford almost every other month, it feels like. Every
And
month.
that's, I guess, what it comes down to for me, is that
It's
it sounds like, oh, just count the days before, the minister and the premier walked out of Queen's Park in handcuffs. And I always want to hold off that expectation, because that doesn't happen. Like, that's not how this usually works.
no.
My thing, my suspicion is, like, not suspicion. The facts are the RCMP and the OPP are very timid in terms of laying charges against a premier or a prime minister in this country. I know we all think that, oh, they're there to come in and lay down the law when a politician abuses their power.
Mhm.
But historically, that doesn't happen in this country. Like, you don't see you're not going to see a big investigation in the RCMP or the OPP coming in to, you know, drag Doug Ford out of Queen's Park and handcuffs. That's not going to happen over this. At best, what I suspect is going to happen is you're going to get, I'm thinking, political ammunition for the NDP or the Liberals or the Greens to use to really hammer home, like, Doug Ford is corrupt as all get out. But we're not going to see any maybe against some of the developers, maybe.
But and then we go, you were mentioning it earlier, but then we go back to, are the Liberals and NDP going to be competent enough to use it?
That,
Because
Laura, that's next week's episode.
in the next, yeah, but like in the provincial election, like they had, I would say they even had the ultimate, like, it was almost served to somebody on a silver platter. Go after everything he's done wrong. He's done wrong in the COVID-19 and handling COVID-19.
Yep.
And there was a lot, and they didn't use
Yep.
it. So, and this
well,
isn't even, and this, if it turns out there was anything wrong, anything criminally done, that's an even bigger silver platter. So are they gonna be smart enough to choose a leader that'll hammer it home, or
I
are
don't
they
know.
just gonna go get somebody, a new face, but the same ideas?
You know what? That's what we'll have to wait and see. I agree. I think this will be this story alone should be the end of Doug Ford's premiership. Like, this has the makings of a scandal 10 times worse than anything the Liberals did when they were in power, which you would think the law of averages, okay, that means that the Conservatives are done. This is it. This is their final term in office, and the Liberals or the NDP will make hay of this, and they'll be hammering every day, every question period, corrupt, corrupt, corrupt. And I'm not seeing that. And I think you raise a valid point. Are our opposition parties competent enough to, you know, make lemonade out of the Conservatives' lemons? And I can't say that that's the case in this situation.
No.
Yeah.
Well, the Liberals haven't really got started with their leadership competition yet that I'm, at least that I'm aware of.
No, well, no, nothing official has been done. And, but the NDP do have a leader in, well, I guess leader in name only. She's not officially, I don't know, elected per se, but Merritt Stiles is the leader of the NDP now, for all intents and purposes. Where is she on this? Where is she to hammer home to Doug Ford? Like, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how corrupt are you, Doug? And she's missing, and I'm astounded. Like, Merritt, like, this is the chance that you're being handed a golden opportunity here, and you're dropping it. It astounds me.
I don't know.
I don't know either. You know what? How about we'll take a quick pause, but come back, because we'll focus on a story that you have going on in Milton. So take a break, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, and we're back. And Laura, you're looking kind of in your own backyard, Milton. We can't. I'd be remiss if I didn't get you a chance to talk about your bread and butter, so to speak. Um,
Yeah.
what yeah, we were talking about the green belt, and this is in part something we've also talked in the past on this podcast about Bill 23, kind of the details of it. How is Bill 23 poised to impact Milton directly?
Well, basically, one of the things that it does is it freezes development charges.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it kind of went off. Sorry about that.
That's gonna let this out.
So it's the Bill 23 freezes development charges, which form as probably a significant source for most of the municipalities in Ontario of their external revenue. And I've been watching this the last month or so because I think it's actually just as serious, if not more, than the environmental consequences. Because but anyway, in Milton's case, 17% of its external revenue source come from these development charges. And development charges, in case you're not aware of what they do, they basically help pay for growth related infrastructure. So you need another park, that's part of the development charges. It's a set amount per unit that's given back to the municipality to help pay for their own growth. So in Milton's case, as I said, I've already said 17.5% or 11 million. And so that's kind of what,
And that's per year, right?
and that's per year. So
right.
If you're freezing it at that while everything is getting more expensive, I think with inflation, with interest rates, cost of living, rent, mortgage, the whole shebang, so to speak, it's gonna take a bite. And they were already in Milton talking about a larger tax increase. And this is another part of it that I don't think has gotten really enough press. I covered at the on election night, I got to interview Mayor Krantz, and Mayor Krantz, if there's a way to save money, he will find it. It used to be if there was a way to save money, he will find it no matter what he had to do. And election night, he actually mentioned that he actually admitted that we're going to be facing some constraints due to the inflation and rising interest rates.
But what I guess I'm trying to picture in my head like what exactly that would mean for the average Miltonian, which I can imagine. Milton was always touted as being this 905 city that was always growing. It is on the is it the place to be, right? You want to move out of Toronto, chances are you're going to move to Milton because it's constantly growing. It's becoming it's kind of this great community. And I wonder, is that going to end? Because like you can pretty much kiss any good transit system goodbye. I mean, that's always the first thing kind of on the chopping block when you have, well, I mean, let's say $11 million a year. Like you say, okay, where can we save money? Okay, well, we just won't buy those new buses to expand a route. Can we just have the route, instead of enough buses for a route to have a stop every half hour,
Yeah.
or maybe like every quarter hour during rush hour, things like that. No, we'll just go back to once an hour. That's what the routes are now because that's all we can afford to have the buses running.
Well, you were talking, I'm gonna pick up a little bit on transit here. You're talking about it. Milton doesn't have very many, I don't think they have any buses that are due east-west routes too much. It's all focused on the GO station and matching up with GO schedules. So like I'm sort of in the southeast corner of Milton, and if I were to try to go by bus to, let's say, the velodrome from my house, I'm in Ontario Street and Derry area. I can't just go get on the bus, go west on Derry Road or Louis Saint Laurent and get to the velodrome. I have to take a bus first up to the GO station, which is north of my house, and then take the route that goes down to the Mattamy National Cycling Center or the velodrome. And
Right.
That's always kind of been infuriating for me a little bit. Like,
Well, I think just to put because I've been to the velodrome, beautiful place to a beautiful looking building. It's exciting to see. It's like literally you are building Olympians inside of it. However, for those of our listeners who are not close to Milton, it's in the middle of a field. Like there's not a lot of stuff around. It's not like in a downtown area. It is. I was a little surprised, like, oh, it's this beautiful looking building in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I often, like, I'm driving, I'll come back from Campbellville sometimes along Derry Road, and you get there and it's like somebody dropped a flying saucer in the middle of the field.
Exactly.
Kind of a feeling.
Exactly. And it's like I always look at it and said, okay, somebody was when they built it, they were planning on building up kind of the amenities around it, right? Like, the neighborhoods and the stuff. It was first part of something. Now, when you're talking about cutting out,
it's going to be the Milton Education Village in the next few years. They've approved a collective post-secondary campus, Laurier and Conestoga. And
okay, but here's a question though. Like, as a major infrastructure like that, that's great. It's great on paper. But if you're coming back to our initial point of if you're cutting out development charges, that you can't build the infrastructure to get people there, because you're talking students. Students don't have cars to drive around Milton. Like, they're going to rely on things like public transit. And now we come back to that's kind of going to be the first thing cut. I guess I'm like the original.
What are you going to cut?
Well, that's the thing. Like, you cut public transit first because you say, all right, we've been getting by so far with as is. We'll just keep doing as is. We don't need to worry about expanding it. After that, it's just putting off.
But there are areas in town now. I don't have specifics in front of me right now, but it's dial-a-bus through some areas right now. So, like, it was done under the previous council. It was basically either a case of you either cancel those routes and it would be that much harder to rebuild it, or you just do dial-a-bus. And I think I'm pretty sure I'm in one of the areas that's affected by that as well. Some days.
But how do you build a town, or how like
you don't?
Again, well, that's the thing. Like, in Milton was always like, basically you're killing the idea of Milton as that up and coming city.
Yeah.
Right? The idea of like Milton's the place to be. We're developing Milton into the community that will meet the needs of the people that live here. And you just say, nope, that's it. Where we are now, that's it.
Yeah.
We want you to build more stuff here. We want you to buy houses, but are you going to get the new parks? No. Are you going to get like new, transit? No.
Well, I don't know that is the answer, but
right. I'm not asking you to solve it.
I don't really have it's not going to be an easy answer.
No, it's not.
I think it's going to be tough, but I've had the sense of the last couple of election cycles that Milton was either at or nearing a crossroads. They could either carry on as sort of the warehousing capital of the GTA. It sometimes feels like, I know I am blowing it out of proportion a little bit, but with a lot of warehousing, or they could go through this transformative development at the Milton Education Village and try to bring new employers, new researchers into town and have an actual hub here in the GTA, and be part of the Toronto Waterloo, the tech corridor. It's right smack in the middle of the tech corridor, and try to build a community that way. But also for quite a few years now, also for the last couple of years anyway, residential growth at one point has outpaced the business growth, and business growth. I think business growth pays more. Businesses pay more taxes than residents do. So if you're shifting that burden onto the residents, it's becoming a more unaffordable place.
Mhm.
Like I've done easily two or three pieces in the last year or so about rents and how expensive it is to rent in Milton and the affordability of it. It's getting untenable almost. There's
Well,
almost no good rental, no rental properties for like a single person or a student or any, and
well, the
what you
question,
have is over $2,000 worth of rent a
right?
month. And
Well, in that case,
um
are you talking like you're talking almost about killing? Like, yeah,
it's
I mean,
almost,
if you're, well, I'm just thinking like if you're talking about like turning around the velodrome into a tech learning hub, we're going to get students and businesses kind of mingling and coexisting. This kind of does kill it off because students are not going to be able to afford $2,000
yeah,
a month rental. Like they're just not. When you say, okay, if I can get an education in whatever field I want, my tech field or whatever, you leave the area. You go to you go to a U of Waterloo, or you go even out of province maybe,
yeah,
um, to find a to get your education. That like this really does like the plan, those plans of, oh, we're going to reshape our community into this tech hub, and that's the next step in Milton's evolution. Cutting out these development charges, you're telling me you're painting the picture of it, it does kind of just kill it dead in its tracks, and it's you shift from a thrive to survive mentality almost as a city or as a town.
um if you put it that way. Yeah, I didn't mean to be so doom and gloom, but
Well,
yeah, you know what, it's either like, um not to rehash pretty old history now, but shortly after the 2018, that was the university was briefly killed off by the Ford government, and they basically went their own way, came up with their plans, and now it's sort of, it was approved through the use of the ministerial zoning order actually, last, I don't know, maybe about almost 2 years ago, I think now. But um yeah, I don't know. And um like you were talking about infrastructure and transit, libraries are another thing. I went to
yes.
school, I went to school at Laurie's Brantford campus, and um like we were lucky because we had the public library was like right next door to my residence. And we but here the closest library is going to be up at Tremaine and Main Street. Like it's not, and you have to cross some pretty major roads to get there if you're going on foot.
Well, not just that, but
Eh,
also just the funding of a library system itself. Um, like libraries bring so much benefit to a community. It's not just a place to go read or take out books. I mean, you get resources center and
it's a
employment.
place for studying.
Yeah.
It's a place like, the way they worked it with the Brantford campus for a while was you would go into the library in Brantford,
Hmm.
order the books you need, and the next day they would be shipped down from Waterloo. And so, but here, I don't know how it's gonna happen. That's why almost at every planning meeting that I've been to afterwards, I'll kind of whisper, what's happening with the library on that campus? Because you have to, you got to think of that.
Yeah, no, it's
It's key to university life, really.
yeah. We'll have to wait and see how. Well, we'll have to wait and see how what happens because of this Bill 23 and the light of if the OPP investigating what happened there does force some changes. Who knows? It's going to be a long 4 years till the next election, so we'll see what happens there.
It's going to be a fighting 4 years as well. It's just going to
Oh
one fight after another.
yeah, I don't like I don't see peace in the next 4 years. I really don't. And we're just talking about the green belt, green environmental and development issues. Forget the issue of healthcare and education. That those fights still have to happen. And
In Bill 24.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fights happening down the road. Speaking of fights, I do want to just mention this one last story before we log off. And that is, I don't know if it's good news or if it's just wait and see what happens, but um, Burlington City Council is declaring a victory in their fight against the downtown development, which is a rare thing to say those words out loud in this day and age. But there's a waterfront, there's a hotel on the downtown waterfront at the corner of Branton Lakeshore that's been slated for redevelopment into a two-tower hotel slash conference center complex. Um, Application went in. The city does not want it to go forward. They're opposed to it. And it was sent to surprise sent application was sent to the OLT to get a ruling. The OLT basically came back and said, no, the argument made to push for the developer to push forward was that it was made with the downtown is an urban growth center and a major transit station area. However, that was made before the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing shifted those centers up towards the Burlington GO station area, which is quite a long ways away. And this is a big issue just before the last election. This was kind of a gimme for at the time was Jane McKenna, who is the MPP in Burlington. We thought that it was kind of her gimme. She got a win, from a major policy win, to say that she's advocating for Burlington kind of thing. What was interesting though, in Roland Cilliers of the Burlington Post was posting that the OLT concluded the application to develop the site was quote unquote made on the day a complete application was accepted by the city of Burlington, which I'm taking that to read as basically the same day that they applied to the city of Burlington for this, or that the city of Burlington accepted the proposal. They also made a kind of beat around the bush to say, okay, we're also applying to the OLT for the appeals process. Like they already knew how this was going to work out. Which again, I kind of take it as what I've said is that the OLT isn't it's not considered a reconciliation process or a remediation process. It's now considered part of the planning process. Like a developer wants to get something done, they just assume we're just going to go to the OLT. So in this case, they're like, well, let's just cut out the middleman. Let's go directly to the OLT for development. It kind of blew up in their face, though. I thought because the OLT was just saying, no, you don't have a leg to stand on this.
Well, I think we were talking just before
Mhm.
before we came on air. Like what stands out to me is the timing of that.
Yeah.
And the big question, I don't think you mentioned it in that story. You mentioned it in that story either, was okay, so who was watching that closely enough to put in the application the day it was accepted?
Yeah.
Right. And it seemed like it was also awfully close. If it was close to an election, it was going to be Like that's a major success for Mayor Ward, isn't it?
Well, wait and
Or
see.
I
It's
like
it's a definite win for this for the mayor for Mayor Ward, Mead Ward, and the Burlington City Council. But I say the battle was won, but the war is not over.
no.
Like this isn't a final ruling that the process won't go through, which I find weird. But again, it's one of those things like the OLT process is this weird convoluted mess of it. It's not just a strict, okay, put for your case, let me hear it out. Okay, yes, no. Here's one reason why. It's like this quasi judicial, we got to rule on it all the way through. That in itself kind of holds up the development like it's just against one of the things, the OT becomes more and more burdensome than it is helpful in this whole
Yeah.
process.
But also on a practical level, do you need the second if there's already if there's already a first conference center and hotel in that area, do you need a second? There's
No.
that could be a question from a practical standpoint too.
Well, I mean, it's an argument. There's an argument to be made. I mean, what you're talking about is the Pearl Spa and Hotel, which is like kind of across the parking lot of the existing hotel. They built a brand new one it's nice. I walked by it and I kind of walked through it. It's a nice hotel and a nice conference center, and I see weddings happening in there all the time. So I'm like, okay, they're definitely, the demand is there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a second one? I don't know. I'm not. I mean, I'm going to argue that the business case must be there, but I don't know what it is. I mean, the majority of the times things I see there are weddings. Like I don't see a lot of business conventions happening there. It's a lot of weddings happening at the Pearl. And also the mayor's city address, which I find kind of humorous considering that she campaigned on being against that hotel for mayor, but now she gives her state of the city address as the mayor from the same hotel. I just find that a very interesting side point. No conclusions to be made from there. Yeah, I think the whole case is a case of, are the people of Burlington getting what they need from the developer, right? Or is the developer just saying, well, I can build this here and I can make some money off it, so that's what I'm going to do? Yeah, maybe, but can you make money as well from giving people something that they actually need or want?
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think that's the crux of the issue that we're coming down to with developers, is that they say, oh, I can't make any money off that. You maybe, but can you, like, somebody can make money off. I don't buy that you can't make money off of building a building. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
And
But in also spinning off into the urban growth center idea, like what was there?
The urban
Was
growth.
that was maybe was that a use of another ministerial zoning order, or
No,
did
the
you see
urban
that,
growth center.
or
The urban growth center was there from the Liberal government's time in
yeah,
office. The Places to Grow Act kind of designated the downtown in Burlington as an urban growth center because there was a bus depot, which is more like a bus office, and just buses always stop there. But it was considered this transit hub. And
yeah,
so that was an urban growth center. So you're going to intensify the downtown because you want the urban transit to meet the demand there. For years, people were trying to get it moved up to the Burlington GO Station area as the urban growth center, because they figured that was a more logical, build a transit hub up by there. There's a more logical spot. Yeah. Basically, the mayor was campaigning on it for years. She finally got it in the last election, so she kind of got the win there. And it looks like that the results of that, the fruits of that fight, might finally be coming to bear with this ruling. Is it going to? I think that it's a question now of like just exactly how does the development process in this province work now? Because if that tower project goes through somehow, I think it just kind of shows like, no, not like the cities have no say in the planning
Yeah,
process, really. Like this is ultimately just like all smoke and mirrors to give the
yeah,
developers what they want. So that's I think where we're coming down to see and how this project will turn out.
yeah.
It's a
Well,
canary in the coal mine situation.
yeah, well, it's kind of, it's been a consistent, it's been a consistent fight for
Mhm.
years up in Milton too, having a say in that development. There's just been like, I've heard things that they would let developments go through just because they wanted to avoid the going to, as it was called then, the OMB. Because
Right.
the OMB, because council would council would deny the development, but the OMB would uphold it. And there you go. So um that's what happened. That's
Yeah, we'll have to wait and
what,
see.
and Milton's been fighting constantly for a say in its own development, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Well, I guess we'll leave it at that for this week's episode. Thanks, Laura, for joining me today. It's been as always, it's been a pleasure.
yeah, it's been fun. I'm glad
Great.
you had me back.
Well,
So
don't screw it up. We'll have you back for another one. I
hope I
kid. I
didn't.
kid.
So
I kid. All right. Thanks very much. We'll talk to everyone next week, folks. Bye bye.